Our second reader tonight is Jason Francis O'Keene. Jason has an MFA from Hamline University and served as assistant fiction editor for Waterstone Review. He has worked as an aerospace engineer, but quit that job to become a stay-at-home dad for his 3 daughters and to focus on his writing. During our orientation this summer, Jason said that his short stories tend to focus on failed men and boys in trouble, which has prompted his wife to ask, "When are you going to write a happy story?" Please welcome Jason O'Keene.
Thank you. I just first want to thank the Loft for providing this opportunity for the Mentor Series. It's been a terrific opportunity, and I want to thank all my friends and family who are here for braving the cold and the snow. And I'm going to read a brand new story today, which has boys in it. They're not quite as in trouble as some of my other stories. But yeah, it's on that theme. It's called Casualties, and I'll read about the first half. Todd did not want to be in Billy's house for another minute, and he definitely didn't want to be all chummy with Billy's mom. He was uncomfortable being on more friendly terms with her than her son. He hated her son. His parents didn't even talk to the Feingards anymore. She was nice, but it didn't feel right. It made him feel like a dork, really. All these times that he had helped her out, moving furniture or hanging a picture or carrying some unused crap out to the garage, and he still felt like a trespasser, a traitor somehow. Like when his family visited his uncle in Atlanta several years ago, and they went to see the cyclorama on the Battle of Atlanta. Amid all the evidence of hardships and tragedies that befell Georgia, all the rebels sympathizing, there he was, Northerner, thinking General Sherman was a badass. Although, and he would be the first to admit this, there could be no connection to Todd being any sort of badass. It was more like Billy was Sherman on his devastating march to the sea, and Todd was the weary war widow whose house and last attempt at a vegetable garden were burnt to the ground. No, this isn't right, Mrs. Feingard was saying, but Todd was looking out the window at the front lawn that he still needed to cut. Let's move the bookcase 3 feet this way. She was gesturing with both arms like she was directing the bookcase to an airport terminal. Todd only nodded. He had moved the heavy mahogany monstrosity 3 times already. He had known the Feingards for a long time. They moved in the day before 3rd grade. From the start, Todd and Billy began spending almost every day together. They were the same age, the only boys in the tiny subdivision, and lived 3 houses apart. Within a week, the two were best friends, both needing a connection, Todd needing someone besides his 4-year-old sister, and Billy needing to feel at home and not alone in this new small town where the dogs roamed freely and there were no sidewalks. 17 years old now, and Todd couldn't help but feel his salad days were already behind him. He and Billy had done everything together. Catch and frisbee, BB guns and dirt bikes. They read X-Men and Spider-Man comic books, watched cartoons, and spied on the neighbors. Fished for sunnies off the creek bridge, built forts out of dead branches in the tiny woods behind Todd's house. Movies, basketball, and sledding. Their first peek at a Playboy. Now, Todd mowed their lawn and enabled Mrs. Feingard in her incessant rearranging of her house. He liked the added business from Mrs. Feingard, but he resented that she paid him to take care of their yard when they had a perfectly capable son of their own. Mr. Feingard did his own shoveling, but otherwise seemed too busy to bother with the rest of it. Todd refused to believe that maybe she was giving him work out of pity. Billy, of course, had better things to do than helping his mom. He was on the football and baseball teams, had lots of friends, and was dating Tabitha Richards. Clearly had more important items on his agenda. Todd's agenda consisted of mowing lawns after school. He was relieved when Mrs. Feingard had come out to bug him today. He had finished with the neighbor's lawn and wanted to be done already. It was a Friday afternoon and hot for October. The ground was hard and pitted beneath his feet. It hadn't rained for almost 3 weeks. The single reason he was able to make some money lately was because of the obsessive watering habits of most of his customers. The nightly hauling out of sprinklers didn't affect the concrete-like nature below the grass, however. It felt as if the soil was already frozen. Every little rise, every bump and uneven ripple was felt through the soles of his grass-stained Nikes. "I think that will do," Mrs. Feingard sounded satisfied with the new living room arrangement. She loved new arrangements. Every time he walked into her house, things were different. Bookshelf moved, new coffee table, the entire layout of the living room redone. On the wall opposite the picture window had hung everything from a large canvas of a colorful abstract painting of what seemed to be a couple hitting each other to an oversized mirror. Today it was a sappy print of a pristine cabin in the woods, complete with a sparkling bonfire. Once he helped her rearrange everything in the kitchen cabinets. Didn't like where she had to reach for the plates, she told him. Todd started to head towards the back door. "How are you, Todd?" She smiled at him with that slight tilt of her head gentle people do when they talk to friendly unknown dogs. I'm fine, Mrs. Feingard." Todd's eyes fell to the carpet. "Todd, it's Judy," she said as she leaned her head to the other side, pretending to be stern. She was always insisting on the first name, ever since they first moved in. "Thanks for helping me. I didn't want to wait for William to get home." She was surveying the room again. Todd hoped she didn't come up with some new idea before he could go. Who knows if William's even coming home before the game tonight anyway? "Yeah, he's a regular ass, isn't he wanted to say. "And stop calling him William. He's Billy. He's not a William." "Are you going tonight? William said it should be a good game." Todd felt like the hired help he supposed he was, helping Billy's mom and mowing Billy's lawn and being asked if he's going to watch Billy play in the big game. "Come watch my son," was how it sounded. He had no plans to go, but even he couldn't bear staying home alone for the big night of the fall. It was homecoming, as he was informed by the homemade banners plastered all over the school this week. He couldn't walk down a hallway without "Go Trojans" shouted down at him from giant sheets of colored paper torn from the oversized rolls in the art room. Todd found it ridiculous that his school's mascot was named after a tribe of warriors famous for being utterly destroyed after falling for the oldest trick in the book. He didn't have friends to call, just the guys he hung out with sometimes. He didn't have a friend, someone that knew him and whom he knew beyond their phony school selves. Billy was the last friend he had, and they hadn't even spoken to each other for over 3 years, since freshman year. The second day, not that he's keeping track, and going to cheer him on under the lights was not exactly high on his to-do list. "Yeah, I guess I'm going." Todd shuffled towards the back door as he spoke. "Oh, Todd, would you also be a dear and carry that box upstairs for me?" Mrs. Feingard did not take notice of Todd's attempt at an exit. "You can set it in the hallway outside of William's room." She was pointing at a large cardboard box near the bottom of the stairs. Todd walked past her as she continued to organize her knickknacks and what else on the bookshelf and stood there looking at the box. It didn't seem like it could be terribly heavy. Why couldn't she do it herself? As if she heard him thinking, Mrs. Feingard said over her shoulder, "It's full of books." She meticulously positioned a crystal bird on the shelf and walked to the kitchen. Todd hadn't been upstairs since probably 8th grade. Mrs. Feingard never had a job for him up there before. Everything was always changing the living room or family room or kitchen. He'd carried things to the basement before, but never upstairs. He lugged the box up the steps and felt a small relief for Mrs. Feingard that she didn't carry it herself. She was all right, he admitted. It wasn't her fault her son was a complete prick. Todd liked how she treated him as somewhat grown up, like he was capable of doing things, appreciated she didn't pretend that he and her son were still good friends. She never insisted that he stick around until Billy got home, never orchestrated some uncomfortable reunion. Billy's room was at the far end of the hall. Todd set the box down and looked at all the signs and posters taped and tacked to the closed door. Things like "Do not enter" and "Keep out," a caution sign warning of radioactive waste, pictures of Michael Jordan and Bob Marley. As he stood there, he heard Mrs. Feingard yelp from downstairs. "Todd, I've got to run to the store. I forgot to get my cumin for my chili. Be a dear and close the door on your way out. I won't be long." Before he could utter a response, the front door slammed. He didn't bother wondering why she couldn't have waited for him to come back downstairs. He was only carrying a box. It wasn't like he was replacing the plumbing in the bathroom. But she'd done things like this all the time to Todd. Sometimes she'd bolt off in the middle of a conversation. "Oh, I forgot to pick up my prescription." Or, "Damn it, I forgot the cucumbers." And she'd be off with nothing more than a shout that she'd be back soon. But he was always downstairs when she left, always in the middle of some task for her, not standing outside of Billy's room. Todd had never thought, what's Billy's room look like now? But he had his hand on the doorknob. It was weird enough that he was up here. How weird would it be to look inside his room? But his hand did not let go. He opened the door with a get-it-over-with rush. Inside, there was the same bright red shaggy carpeting. There was the same bed, a twin with dark-stained hardwood, navy blue sheets balled up and pushed aside. The same bay window looking out on the backyard with the bench seat in front of it that Todd had always wished he had in his room. He was surprised by how Billy's room was still so much like it used to be. The Dr. J poster where he's still young and has the big afro, the Robin Yount poster, the fake parking sign for Packers fans only, even the old wallpaper of baseball team logos. There were new posters now, Guns N' Roses and AC/DC, an obnoxious picture of expensive sports cars with the line, "He who has the most toys wins." An electric guitar leaned against the wall. On a shelf sat dusty old trophies, one of them lying on its side. Most were from Little League. Todd had some of the same trophies, although he didn't know where any of them were anymore. Tiny batters made of fake gold plating, ready to swing, on top of pillars of more fake goldishness and marble, little plaques at the bottom. He picked up one trophy, its little batter misshapen, like the two sides of the mold hadn't quite lined up. He ran his finger over the engraving. Low Falls All-Star Game. Todd did not have this one. The team had voted for 2 All-Stars. Billy was a lock, as he had easily become the team's best hitter and pitcher that year. Todd kept playing wherever he was needed, mostly catcher, which he liked because it meant he could catch for Billy. Todd figured that he could get the second spot, that probably he was the next best guy on the team. But when the tally was read, Todd's sole vote was from himself. Before this, Billy's drift away from Todd was slow and almost unnoticeable, like when Todd lost his inflatable raft when he was 7 on Big Turtle Lake. The little canoe-like raft was right next to him, but then something caught his eye on the shore, a sandpiper, nervously casing the beach. Todd watched it pace the sand, the blur of its stick legs, the constant teetering. When he turned for his raft, it was 40 feet away, headed out to the middle of the lake, carried by an invisible current. Todd was left watching Billy now. He had an easiness, a self-assuredness that Todd didn't have. He had a natural way with people, a talker. Todd realized that they were no longer the same size either. Billy looked bigger and stronger every time he stood next to him. He found himself wishing he could be more like Billy. He even wished his name was more like Billy's. Todd sounded so dull, a blunt thudding sound, short, harsh, with a middle vowel that some Midwestern accents made even more unappealing, producing it high in the back of their throats with their mouths forming a flat oval instead of a circle. Tad. It couldn't even produce a nickname. You could do so much with William. In fact, after they entered high school, Billy went by Will. You couldn't do anything with Todd. In middle school, he watched Billy navigate farther and farther away, afraid to follow him out into the deep. They would spend some time together, but it had become less frequent, more by accident. Billy acted more put out when they saw each other, and drop-by visits to his house no longer seemed okay. By the time they entered high school, Billy was clearly far off from shore in the middle of the lake, far off from Todd, who was still struggling in the shallows, which was what made his punching out of Billy such a shock to everyone, especially Todd. Thanks.